Nick Kershaw and The Riddle. You listen to BBC Radio Manchester. It's mid-morning with me, Mike Sweeney. Can I just wish you a really good morning? And again, warmish, which is quite nice, around the 20 mark. I'm not certain there's a heat wave on the way, but it does look as if it's going to stay quite warm through into the Bank Holiday Monday, which is a bit of a bonus. So, talking about ConeBoy, which will be new to you. ConeBoy is a drama show. It's spoken word, it's music. It's coming to the Manchester Fringe in September, from the musician Clive Parker Sharp. Clive was a founder member of Big Country. He was also in Spiz Energy, if you remember Spiz Energy, and he's an author. He's got his second book is ConeBoy, and it's semi-autobiographical. And he did this with the actor and singer Marshall Starr, and this is all coming to the Fringe here in Manchester, and it's a poignant take on the media from the 70s right through and now via the lens of a boy, ConeBoy, because of his appearance. So the thing to start off with, obviously, is by asking Clive, who actually is the man behind ConeBoy?
I primarily kind of came on the scene in the punk days and, came up through punk. Prior to that, I'd been in show bands where I'd lived. And as you said, I'd been in the members. And I got into a band called Spiz Energy, who were a kind of cult punk band at the time, who had a hit with Where's Captain Kirk? And then I joined up with Stuart Anderson in Big Country, and kind of after that went on and did my own stuff. So, I'd probably say that, I've always been on the sidelines, quite left of field in the stuff that I've done. And sometimes that's, seeped over into the mainstream. When we formed Big Country, it was very much about, creating a new sound, doing something very different and unique. And obviously that exploded when, In a Big Country was such a big hit, which was amazing and a surprise to me. So, I've always been on the, probably on the counterculture side and carving my own furrow with rock music and alternative music.
It is a bit ironic that, and I remember when Fields of Fire came out, and it was definitely very different. And what was, as you say, right, ironic, is that this very different, quite left field sound with like Celtic overtones and stuff became massively successful.
Yeah, I was in the early lineup of the band, and this was our sort of concept that we wanted to see through, which was, combining folk music with rock music. Unfortunately, I think, later on, Stuart probably worked himself into a bit of a corner with that sound, the EBOs and the dueling Scottish guitars. But it was all about trying to do something different. Both Stuart and I had come up through punk. It was all about pushing the boundaries and creating a new sound. Obviously, Big Country became part of the mainstream. And, I think for Big Country, it was very difficult to shake off those, what became cliches. Stuart, later on did start to try and do something different, but unfortunately that came too late. But I went on and did other stuff, and always, I've always been pushing the boundaries, and that's what I'm doing with this current show, ConeBoy, which, I'm taking around the country and I'm bringing to Manchester. With Big Country, unfortunately, I think it's a sound that didn't necessarily weather so well. So it's gone down a little bit, but I think it'll come back. There's talk of doing a documentary about Stuart Anderson and Big Country, which I think will bring them very much to the forefront again.
Explain ConeBoy to me.
ConeBoy is based on my second book, and it is about a boy who becomes famous for his special look, and he becomes a media darling and is exploited by his family and those he should trust. And it questions whether blood is thicker than money. And ConeBoy highlights some more serious issues about loyalty and family and ultimately betrayal. But it's a rock and roll musical with some great kind of rollicking songs. So, it's infused with a bit of comedy, drama, spoken word, but it's very much, the kind of left of field area that I've always been pursuing. And it's based on my own experiences. It's semi-autobiographical and, kind of drawing on people and places from the 1970s. And it's interesting that you should mention, Mike, about Big Country and the punk scene that I was very much part of, because it's, you know, it's quite recent times, and yet they were very different days. And I think people are very interested in that. And this show is very much about that. It's a kind of, you know, chaotic, anarchic show. And I'm bringing a little bit of that, you know, anarchy to Manchester on the 10th of September. It's a unique show that's doing something a little bit different.
We've got more about ConeBoy in this hour. Golden Hour on BBC Radio Manchester. And part 2 of my conversation with Clive Parker-Sharp, founder member of Big Country, and was in the punk band Spiz Energy. And he has this brilliant spoken word music drama show that's headed for the Fringe here in Manchester. And we were having this conversation, and he told me more about what ConeBoy is all about.
ConeBoy is all about how the media has changed and how it was dominated by the red tops and the music papers and the dailies back in the 70s and 80s, and how that's developed over time to social media now. I think there's an important romanticism that is to do with the 70s and 80s. You know, like I said, it's recent times, but it seems like it could be almost Edwardian times in a way. You know, and I think, Mike, that is down to communication. Communication has come on so massively. It's hard to imagine a world without, you know, smartphones and mobile devices. We're so connected now. But back in the day, you know, music developed in a different way. We were very isolated. You know, if you were out in the provinces or Manchester or Glasgow, you did not know what was going on in London or Plymouth or Cornwall or Seattle or wherever. So, you know, I think bands like the Jesus and Mary Chain and, you know, some of these groundbreaking bands wouldn't have come about now, regrettably, because it was the lack of connectivity that fed into people doing their own thing and being so unique. They were working in isolation, and so they only had their own brains and their own creativity and their own four walls that surrounded them to get that together. So in a way, you know, ConeBoy is highlighting the difference between then and now. And one has to remember, Mike, that, you know, to communicate with somebody back then, you had to have like a big pocket full of change, traipse down the road to a phone box, you know, often to find that the phone had just been vandalised, or send a letter, which, you know, would take 2 weeks to get somewhere if you were lucky.
Do you know, I remember so clearly that when I started the Salford Jets, we were told to take Salford out of the name because it was so northern, and even then we had to go cap in hand to London to find music publishers, to find record companies, etc. And one of the reasons we were told that we didn't really do better than we did, because we were asked to relocate to London and we wouldn't. And you're right that the world was different then. Can I bring you back to, you'll be on the Fringe in September with ConeBoy. Yeah. And I've asked this question when we've recently had the Manchester International Festival. How do you, with the events like the Fringe, make them accessible, and it's not that you're going on stage each night to other members of the Fringe who get what you're doing in inverted commas and everybody pats each other on the back? How do you make that performance, that venue and that environment accessible to people listening to you and I now that might never think of going to the Fringe?
I think it's interesting you should bring that up. Because of the pandemic, you know, I've tapped into doing these Fringe festivals to counteract that very reasoning, because they give the facility for people to go along and interact. And, you know, what I do at the end of the show is I ensure that we have a two-way, you know, a Q&A, and it's just as much about me asking other people questions and getting them involved, and, you know, that important interaction that we've lacked for so long because of the pandemic, you know, kind of getting that important feedback again, and the two-way between audience and performers. You know, I think that's something that's been lacking, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to, you know, get involved in some Fringe festivals, because they can offer you some interesting venues. And we're doing the Antwerp Mansion, which, you know, I think is a very unusual venue. You know, we haven't just plopped into like some theatre somewhere or some rock gig. You know, I've made sure that we try to do some weird and wonderful venues that are stimulating, and they're somewhere different for people to go. So it's all about the interaction. It's all about the two-way. And, just as much about the audience getting involved in the show as just putting on a straight show. And it's definitely not elitist. I've never been elitist, Mike. From, you can tell with the types of bands that I've been in and the stuff that I've done. People are going to come along and have they're going to be challenged, but they're also going to hear some fantastic rock acoustic tunes done by Marshall and me. Be a very exhilarating show. And they're going to get that two-way and that feedback.
So there's ConeBoy headed for the Fringe.